for the LSATs in March last year, and I used a bunch of different methods, used a bunch of different prep test companies. So, anything ranging from 7Sage to PowerScore, but ultimately I landed on the LSAT Unplugged community, and that was the time when I saw a very big jump in terms of increasing my LSAT score. So the community here helped me a lot, and I'm just hoping to kind of give back now by being an instructor. But tonight, I kind of want to do similar to the mastermind courses that Steve usually does. So just a general Q&A to start off with, any questions that you may have, and then we'll jump into a deep dive into principle questions, so logical reasoning principle questions, and then we'll look at some passages as well. But feel free to unmute yourself and to, ask me any questions.
So you said that there was a massive jump when you started these courses. Was that because of a particular, learning technique, or was it what changed in, your day-to-day that really made that jump?
Yeah, so before I joined the course, I was mainly I was doing self-learning. So I went through, the PowerScore Bibles, I went through LSAT Trainer. I primarily, with those, resources, you primarily focus a lot on the theory behind the questions, how to answer the questions, but at the same time, I think you're missing out on a lot of the kind of test-taking skills that you need to really ace the test. So, in terms of time management, how to deal with, drilling, how you should practice, just those sort of things that I was missing out on. Those things I didn't get from just the curriculum per se, but just by going to the mastermind classes, and just by posing my questions whenever there was an opportunity. The students within the community who had obviously a lot more experience than I did at the time were able to give me a lot of good tips. So for example, one of the things that I really got out of the course that improved my logic gains was I used to have a lot of trouble with timing for logic games. I would never be able to finish a section on time. And one of the tips that I got from one of the students was, instead of doing the global questions first, start off with the local questions. And because when you do the local questions, you get a lot more information out of that, right? So then you kind of just plug in and you can eliminate some of the answer choices when you do go back to the global questions. So that was one thing that I tried out after I attended the class, and then that improved my score and timing a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. We have a question here from Ariel. How long did you study for LSAT in total? How much time did you spend studying between the time when you got the 153 and 170? Sorry, no, it's okay. So I studied from March all the way to November. I would say I spent at least 2 hours a day minus weekends studying for the LSAT. I think at the beginning it was a little bit more intensive, and then so I was originally planning on taking the LSAT in June, and I kind of figured that I wasn't ready yet. I registered for it, and then the week leading up to it, I was kind of freaking out and had this total mental breakdown and was like, okay, I'm definitely not ready for this. So I withdrew from that test. I got a lot of support from the community again, and got a lot of support from Steve in this decision. And after that, I kind of just took a step back and looked at my review process, really kind of focused in on my weaknesses, my weak spots, which were making me nervous about taking the test. And so from June to November, that's when I really kind of just drilled those weak spots. And then by the time my test came around in November, I was completely comfortable with taking it. Madison has a question. What would you say your biggest hurdle was in studying? Whether it's a specific section or timing or something else, what helped you get over that? Okay, I had a lot of hurdles. At the beginning, I used to be pretty, well, I think I am a pretty decent academic student. You know, I've always gotten good grades, and so I came to the LSATs and just, it was a completely different world for me. Nothing that I was doing worked. You know, rote learning and kind of memorization really does not work when it comes to the LSATs. So I think firstly, a big hurdle was kind of just the mental kind of hoop that you have to jump through. Getting that 153 on my first diagnostic definitely did not feel good. And then I think after going through multiple books, so like the Power Score Bible, Seven Sage, you know, things like that, I ended up with like a 160, 163 PTing, but I was aiming for that 170. So that was kind of, I plateaued there and I didn't really know where to go from there. And that's when I joined LSAT Unplugged. And slowly, I started to see that the test isn't just about knowing how to answer the questions. It's also about finding the most efficient way for you to do it. You can't just read someone else's method or, you know, look at a curriculum and say, okay, like this is the way I'm going to do it, if you don't inherently understand what it is that you're doing. So as I went deeper into the process, I did a lot of deep review. I did a lot of drilling, and I compared sometimes the methods that I used in timed situations and also in untimed situations. And I would go through the way I did things and think about, am I doing this the most efficient way? So for example, for logic games, I would do a logic games timed, and then I would do it untimed. And I would compare the way in which I thought about the game in both types of situations. And then I would think about, is this the most efficient way? Can I do it any faster? Am I making notes that I'm not really using? And I would cut those out of the process. So I think the biggest, I guess the way I jumped through my biggest hurdle in terms of that plateau was just really finding an efficient way for me to do it. And I think that's really important. So you really have to do a lot of deep review and look at the way you're thinking about things. Jocelyn, can you run through a typical study day? Okay, so a typical study day, yeah, no worries, Madison. A typical study day, that would be very different in terms of where you are in the process. So, you know, at the very beginning, you're learning about the theory behind the test, right? So, you know, at first you're kind of mostly, you know, you would learn by question type. You would learn about what the question is asking you. What's a sufficient assumption question? What's a necessary assumption question? And you would kind of, I would take notes about it, and then I would kind of do a few questions and go from there. Once I had all of that down, I started doing, Steve's Socratic review method after I joined the course, and that really, really helped me. So later on, when I was trying to make that jump from low to mid 160s to 170, a typical day of studying for me, I would do 2 practice tests a week. So one on Monday, and then I would just take a break. And then Tuesday and Wednesdays, I would really go in and kind of look at the questions that I weren't really sure about, and look at the questions I flagged, look at the mistakes that I made, and then I would go through the Socratic review method. And then later on in the process, when you're at that very end and you're just really trying to refine, that looks completely different too, because I would go through, towards the very end, you know, one of the things that I realized for me was that I had a weak spot in, for example, grouping questions for logic games. And I would spend an entire day just drilling grouping questions and then finding the most efficient way that I would be able to do them. So a typical day looks very different, depends on where you are in the process. Ariel, can you give your number 1 tip that helped you the most for logic games, logical reasoning, and reading comprehension? Okay, quick tips. Okay, logic games, I would really recommend what I did just because it really worked for me. just in terms of, I think if you have a weak spot, so say you're really not bad, but you might not be great at grouping games, or you might not be great at sequencing games. If you find an area of weakness, really go in and drill those questions. Look at where you're kind of making mistakes, where your lack of understanding is, and then also look at whether or not you can do things more efficiently. So you can do this by, doing an entire section, or, drilling by question type, doing it timed, and then doing it untimed, and seeing, what you're missing out on, what you're doing inefficiently. For logical reasoning, I really, really do recommend the Socratic review method in terms of reviewing your mistakes. I really don't believe in just constantly drilling or doing, a million practice tests before going into the test, because essentially what you're doing is, the reason you're making mistakes is because you're thinking a certain way. You're making, kind of mistaken assumptions, and that's what's leading you to the mistakes that you're making for logical reasoning. And if you don't pick up on those mistakes early and you just keep drilling questions thinking that it's going to get better, you're simply drilling in that wrong way of thinking, and that can be more harmful. I think if you're just doing that, it might be better for you to just not do any questions at all. So for logical reasoning, I really recommend just really looking at your mistakes and then thinking about, so why did I think this? Why was this wrong answer choice attractive to me? Why was the right answer choice not attractive to me? And then writing a little note to yourself, just thinking, so I did this time, next time be aware of this and don't do it again. And then for the Socratic review method, what I would do, I would have all of these kind of takeaways that I would write to myself, and then right before I did the next practice test, I would review my notes. So I would go through the list of all the takeaways that I had made for myself, and then I would start the next practice test. And for reading comprehension, I would have the same advice, just Socratic review.
One more question.
Oh yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
So when you started out studying with Steve, and you said basically making sure that you have those foundations, what tips can you give? I'm starting out, I kind of started last week, and so I'm kind of revamping how I'm thinking about the LSAT just period, right? So how did you check to make sure that you understood those concepts and foundations before moving to timing?
Sure. At the very beginning, and also, each prep test company, they kind of focus on question types, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's important, the LSAT, the questions, for example, for logical reasoning or reading comprehension, is asking you for very specific things. Things like parallel reasoning, or things like sufficient assumption, or must be true, or conditional reasoning. Those are things that you don't really see outside of the world of LSATs. So you really have to, I think, understand exactly what the questions are asking you. So what I did in terms of understanding the foundation, I guess what I mean is understanding what each question type is asking of you. And how did I know that I was ready for, taking that next step in terms of learning about the skills? I drilled by question type, and each question type, I kind of made myself a list of things. So step 1, sufficient assumption. What do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? So that the method of doing questions by question type was so ingrained into my brain that when I saw it on the test, I didn't have to think, oh, okay, this is a sufficient assumption question. What do I do next? I didn't want that. I wanted to go into a timed test with just a completely automatic mode, just going in as a robot and having that kind of inherent reaction to the questions. So I think that at that point, after I had drilled by question type and knowing, what I had to do for each question type, that's when I felt ready to move on. but that's just my process. I hope that helps. Star has a question. How are you studying for the test knowing that it would be flex? Did you practice 5 sections or did you simulate by doing 3? So I only did 3 because I knew that it was going to be the flex. So yeah, just do 3. I think we're pretty lucky that it's flex. I think doing 5 would have, I don't know how people cope with 5. Ariel says, what was your reading comprehension approach when doing timed prep tests? For me, reading comprehension is the most daunting because it seems impossible to get through all 4 passages in 35 minutes. Yeah, reading comprehension was definitely the hardest section for me as well. It used to be my best section when I started off because it's so familiar to us, right? And then towards the end, you kind of realize it's the least learnable almost. So for reading comprehension, I definitely did have trouble maintaining, the time limit. What I would recommend is that you have to kind of read in a certain way. You're not reading as if you're reading some news article or some academic research paper. You're reading for very specific things. So the questions, they'll ask you for the author's viewpoint. They'll ask you for what the evidence is supporting the viewpoint. They'll ask you for any kind of counter arguments from other people. They'll ask you for what the structure is. So read for these specific things. You don't have to kind of maintain all the information that the passage is giving you in your head, and you don't really have to read every single little detail. They're not asking for that. They're asking for very specific things. So I think for reading comprehension, my tip would be know what the passages are asking you for. So I think Steve has some videos in his course where he tells you, viewpoint, evidence, things like that. Really be disciplined and read for those things. And you'll find that you'll get faster as you go on. What are some last-minute study tips you might have right before taking the test? Last-minute study tips, I would say don't tire yourself out. Before the June exam, I kind of freaked out and was taking 1 practice test every other day, and I became very burnt out. So don't do what I did. And I think really just take it easy. I would recommend, the week of your test or even the week before your test, do 1 practice test, do the Socratic review after you do your test, and just really take it easy. One other tip would be don't do practice test 88. That has a very infamous logic game section, and it will most likely freak you out, as it did me. So don't do that one. Do a practice test, maybe that one that you've done before, and that'll make you feel good about yourself and boost your confidence going into the test. Ariel, did you read the questions first before getting into the passages so that you knew exactly what to look for? Okay, so yeah, when I first started out, I used to read the stimulus first, and obviously there are like a lot of different schools of thoughts on which you should read, but towards the end, I definitely started reading the questions first, just because usually I would say the passage and the question type, so say for example, there's a must be true question. Must be true questions are usually paired with a fact set as opposed to an argument. So you don't want to go in, so, if you know that must be true, okay, it's going to be a fact set. I'm not going into the passage looking for an argument. I'm not going in looking for kind of a weakness, for example. So I think reading the question stem first allows me to go into it reading for exactly what I need to read. How did you avoid burnout considering that you studied for 8 months? Yeah, I didn't avoid it. I had burnout. I had burnout after the right before the June exam. And I was someone who was always kind of like, oh, I'm not going to get burnt out. I saw all of these kind of warnings online about don't do this, don't do that. And I was like, oh no, I'll be fine. And then, yeah, no, I was not fine. One thing I would say about burnout is that it creeps up on you very quickly. I didn't really see myself getting there, and then it just hit me like a ton of bricks. One day I just realized I wasn't even processing the easiest LR questions, and that's when I realized I was burnt out. So after that happened, from I think late June to July, I took a half-month break, and I didn't look at LSATs whatsoever. And I was kind of worried about forgetting what I had learned, but you really do get back on it very quickly. It's kind of almost like riding a bicycle. So yeah, definitely take a break if you need it. Jack, well, what do you recommend if you need to take, if you need a break from practice tests but still want to study? Can't tell if I'm burnt out right now or if I just need to take a day to review my approach and some basics. Well, I mean, I would usually, so for me, I would say don't study for too long at once. So maybe study for like an hour and take a break, study for an hour, take a break, study, an hour in the morning and then in the afternoon. There's this app, this is like kind of, this is very off the tracks now, but there's this app called Forest that I downloaded, and you basically put a timer on the app and it allows you to grow a tree in the app and you get to cultivate your little garden. And by growing the tree, so basically it's kind of like a anti-procrastination app where if you touch your phone, the tree will die. So, I couldn't check Facebook, I couldn't message people during that time. And I was very focused during that 1 hour. And, after I think it's 10 hours or something, you get to donate your hours, and they plant a real tree. So, you're doing something good for the environment as well. So that was an app that I had when I was studying. But yeah, definitely, if you think you need a break, take a break. Matthew, were you in school working during the time when you were studying, or were you studying full time? I was, so I used to work and I took a unpaid leave. I was fortunate enough to do that, but I was also doing side projects on the side, but I would definitely say I had a lot of kind of freedom in terms of my time. Did you apply already for this cycle, you mean? Yeah, I am applying this cycle and I missed a Harvard dong wave today. So I'm very proud of myself, even though I haven't gotten any sort of admittances as of right now. But I feel like the fact that I missed a dong wave and they've done people who applied after me makes me very proud. I almost want to put it on my CV, made it through the first round of Harvard rejects. But yeah, I'm definitely applying right now. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, just I guess I would say get the LSATs out of the way. And after that, you'll feel a lot better. Thank you. And I know you guys, some of you guys will have tests coming up in January. I think there's one, and then one in March. So definitely good luck to everyone for that. And feel free to reach out if you ever need anything.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.